Okay, hi, Paul Sackis, Good News Planet. I'm speaking with Daniel Kalla. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Good. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. Mutual friend Nisha Cohn said Dan has a lot of good news to share, and so that's our buzzword.
Yeah.
You've written a book,
Yep.
And I believe it has something to do with Israel and the Jewish community, or does it not?
Well, definitely the Jewish community, but it has to do with the Shanghai Jews of World War II. It's a novel of the story of the 20,000 German Jews who escaped to Shanghai during World War II and survived there. And it's one of the few good news stories of the Holocaust about a group that got away and lived with dignity and flourished in Shanghai. And very few people know about this little slice of history.
Actually, I interviewed the gentleman who owns the Gundel and owns a Hungarian restaurant here, Cafe des Artistes, and I sort of semi-recollect in his book, George Lang, that he told me, listen to this story, he told me, this is a great chef, great restaurant, and is a great man, business with Ronald Lauder, no less. Mm-hmm. You probably know more about it than, I don't know if I'm right here, if I recollect, this is years ago, that he did leave Hungary, this was Hungary,
yeah.
And he went into Russia, and he told me that he was teaching the Chinese English, but he actually was teaching them Hungarian.
That's entirely possible. I mean, the amazing thing, Shanghai was one of these amazing cities. It was, called the Paris of the East in the 1930s, but it was more like the Vegas of Asia, right? Everybody was there, and it was this melting pot. It was a microcosm of the world at war. It had everything. It had the fascists, the communists, the Jews, the Germans, the Allies, the Axis. They all lived side by side in this amazing city. And there's so many obviously horrible stories of the Holocaust, but this is an incredible one of these few who were lucky enough to get there. And they recreated this. There was already a Jewish community in Shanghai anyway. People don't realize this, but Shanghai is quite a Jewish city. The richest and most successful early settlers were the Baghdadi Jews, the Sephardic Jews who came there. Like Sir Victor Sassoon was the most famous person in Shanghai till the communists came. And so there was that wave. And then after the Civil War in Russia, there was a group of white Russian Jews that came there. So there was a Russian Jewish community. And this German community that came there were the third community to arrive. And so it was a remarkably Jewish city for Asia. And, and the things they experienced and had to survive through were incredible.
Well, I'm fascinated. Actually, our TV studio is in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
And a lot of Jews came here too.
Absolutely, and a lot of the Shanghai Jews after they survived the war and the communists basically booted them out of the country. A lot of them came to America. A lot of them came to New York. So there are a bunch of descendants of those Shanghai Jews here in the city.
Very interesting. Okay, so how did you get interested in this subject? Are you have relatives that were Shanghai Jews?
Almost. My family, both my sides. My dad was a Hungarian Jew who barely survived in Budapest through the Nazi and he said the Hungarian Nazis were worse than the German Nazis. And my mom's family was from Czechoslovakia. And when she was 4 years old, they escaped on the very last commercial flight out of Prague. My grandmother actually tricked my grandfather into going over, he was a doctor, to London for a fellowship that didn't exist because she knew he would never leave. And they hopped on the very last flight out of the country without visas and landed. So they had their own adventure. But what really interested me in this story in particular was about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm a physician and I've written 5 medical thrillers. And I was being interviewed after my first medical thriller by Reader's Digest, and the woman who looked like Woody Allen and Barbara Streisand's love child said to me, my parents grew up in Shanghai. And I said, what? How? And she said, you hadn't heard of these Shanghai Jews? And I said, no. And that's when I started researching this incredible story that nobody seems to tell, and it's wonderful. And it's still there. When you go to Shanghai now, there's a beautiful Jewish museum, and there's an Israeli fellow who gives tours of the Jewish area and all this incredible culture that they left behind.
Can we see some of this on either your website or have some of the photos of the Shanghai Museum?
Yeah, well, connection to it. It's at danielkalla.com. You can get there. And there's also Jewish tours of Shanghai, and you can see and the beautiful pictures of it. At one point, there were 6 gorgeous synagogues in Shanghai, and as I said, this museum that still stands. Now the Chinese are very proud of the role they played, inadvertent as it was, in saving these German Jews.
Wow. Okay. So this is quite an interesting, phenomenal story, and I guess this is a new type of a book then for you. medical thrillers, that's of interest as well. But let's stay on this for. This is going to go into Good News Israel, but now I've also going to put this into Good News China, which we have.
Great.
And it's the Chinese. It's funny kind of stuff, but the Chinese put me in business.
Really?
27 years ago.
Wow.
In multicultural marketing and advertising. I was
Yeah.
with CBS and then PBS 14 years.
Yeah.
And then I am a one world guy.
Yeah.
And I grew up, I'm just going to share this with you because
Sure.
it's the first time we're meeting. I grew up in a Hungarian Jewish home, okay? And we, we're very proud of our ethnicity. President of the temple and
Yeah.
President of Hadassah. My family and extended family worked tirelessly
Yeah.
for the community of the Jews, and continue to do that. And so, and that sort of was handed down to me. So I was a product of ethnic marketing. But I also was a product of one world, and that we were all together. And it was my mother, who was the librarian, actually, at Temple Emmanuel, here in New York, the largest temple, gave me the book of Reverend Norman Vincent Peale, The Art of Positive Thinking, that we're all in this together, and so on and so forth. So what happened with my career is that I became in charge of a station here, WNYC, the head of marketing, and the Chinese were there. And they saw and they said to me, well, you're a TV guy. Maybe you can help sell our advertising, all right, and marketing. But they literally did, if I recollect, I think this is true, said to me, you're white, you're Jewish, you can get into Procter & Gamble. And made a sale. And he said, your community, the Jews community, are known to be hard workers. And the Chinese are known to be hard workers. So this is all starting to
It all fits.
bubble.
Well, there's a couple interesting things. That's a great story. But first of all, the Chinese have always been known as the Jews of Asia because they value the same sort of qualities: education, family, the same kind of things, relative peacefulness, and they were an oppressed people, certainly by the Japanese. But your story is particularly funny about the Procter & Gamble because the Japanese who controlled Shanghai by the time my hero and heroine are in the city had an amazing viewpoint of the Jews that arrived there. They had what was called positive anti-Semitism. They read the Protocols of Zion and everything else, and they said, well, if the Jews control all the banks and the Jews control all the government, then the Jews should be respected people that we should treat very... Everything that they used as stereotype in Europe to turn against the Jews, they actually, found the qualities to admire, or those same kind of silly stereotypes. So it's amazing how much of that went on back then.
So what do you want people to learn from your book?
Well, I want them to learn a little history because I think this is a secret, and it should be much better known, this story. It was an amazing story. But I also want them, I hope this is a good suspenseful war yarn and tells about a few cultures. It's obviously the hero is a secular Jew from Austria who escapes with his daughter, but the heroine is a Eurasian woman who feels like a fish out of water in her own city. Shanghai had a huge Eurasian community, and they have a difficult kind of romance. But I hope that people will take all kinds of cultural nuggets out of this story and learn about a lot of people, because there were a lot of people. There were terrible Japanese, but there were also some good Japanese who helped the Jewish community. There were obviously, there's nothing but terrible Nazis, but there were some good Germans who helped too. And I tried to roll all that up into one story and give people a perspective on, because it's not all that different from some situations in the world right now where people are oppressed. So,
All right. The name of the book again is?
The Far Side of the Sky.
And your website again?
Daniel Kalla, DanielKalla.com.
And they can get the book?
At Barnes & Noble's, other books, independent bookstores, and online.
Excellent. Last question. What's good news for Daniel?
Being in New York for 2 days with my wife. It's an absolute joy.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Thanks, Paul. That's great.